Despite being written by award-winning comedy writer Ben Elton, The Right Way is considered by the critics to be one of the worst British comedies ever produced. But is this assessment fair? Today on BuzzMoose, I will be analysing this by looking at what worked, what didn't, and whether it deserved a second series to put things right. Hello and welcome to BuzzMoose. My name is McAndrew and I am best known for playing the character of Cecil Noggle on my own online comedy channel Jing TV, which you can find the links for by going to jingtvonline.com. The Right Way is based around the character of Gerald Wright, the Chief Health and Safety Officer for the fictional Basildon Borough Council. The series revolves around Gerald's love life and the work challenges and how both are hindered by his obsessive behaviour. The show relies heavily on sexual innuendo and slapstick, which some people look down upon and other people really enjoy. On paper, the show sounded very promising, being written by Ben Elton and starring David Haig, who was absolutely hilarious as Detective Inspector Grimm in The Thin Blue Line. Reuniting Haig with his Thin Blue Line co-star Mina Awar was also a positive for me, yet it's clear that neither the critics nor the public really took to the show and did not hold back in their criticism. I do actually understand Ben Elton's desire to lampoon health and safety officers. I too have a character of that kind called Neil Walton, who is very loosely based on a safety officer at a former place of work. I ended up being put in a very embarrassing situation where I was a fire marshal. I wasn't very impressed by the training I'd received, and when the alarm did go off in error, the system he set up to stop the fire engine coming broke down. Despite this not being my fault, it was me that had to greet the firefighters and tell them that they had wasted their journey, and that was not fun. The stars of The Right Way are as follows. David Haig, who plays the titular role of Gerald Wright. Gerald is very over-particular about how things are done, hence the play on words The Right Way. Like Inspector Grimm, Gerald goes on hilariously funny rants. Where the characters differ though, is that Inspector Grimm plays fast and loose with the rules, whereas Gerald is over-particular about following procedures. He is also torn over whether to win back his ex-wife Valerie or pursue a romance with his work colleague Malika. Joanne Matthews, who plays Susan Wright. Susan is Gerald's daughter, who also lives with him. Beattie Edmonson, daughter of comedy legends Adrian Edmondson and Jennifer Saunders, who plays Victoria. Victoria is Susan's eccentric and dippy girlfriend, who also lives with Susan and David. She is a struggling DJ. Haig's Thin Blue Line co-star Mina Awar, who plays Malika Maha. Malika is Haig's colleague and one of two of his love interests. This character is a big departure from Constable Habib, Mina's role in The Thin Blue Line. Habib was often the voice of sanity at Gasford Police Station, whereas Malika is rude, selfish, petty, and may possibly have killed her ex-husband. She seems to get particular enjoyment in using her role to make life difficult for others. Robert Daws, who plays Mayor Len Winkler, who I know better as Tuppy Glossop from Jeeves and Wooster. The mayor often speaks in jumbled sentences, in ways similar to Yoda and Bruce Forsyth. He is the main antagonist of the series, often butting heads with Gerald over health and safety matters. Kacey Ainsworth, better known to most people as Little Mo in EastEnders. She plays Valerie Wright. Valerie is Gerald's ex-wife and Susan's mother. Gerald would like to get Valerie back, but she is currently living with her new Australian boyfriend Kyle. Luke Gell, who plays Clive Beaches, Gerald's nervous and socially awkward assistant. Toby Longworth, who plays Bernard Stanning. I think the idea behind Bernard is that he says inappropriate things and is slightly laddish and uncouth. Despite appearing in every episode, his contributions aren't really that significant. Brent Edwards, who plays Mrs. Johnson, the cleaner at Gerald's work. She often walks in at awkward moments when it looks like Gerald is engaged in a sexual act. She expresses her outrage every time. Michael Falzon, who plays Kyle. Kyle is Valerie's dim-witted and vain Australian boyfriend, and Susan suspects he may be trying to swindle her mother. Hannah Jane Fox, who plays Cheryl Dolores. In the first 2 episodes, Cheryl is an ordinary member of the public, who ends up getting in arguments with Gerald over queue etiquette. In episode 4, however, she becomes Mayor Winkler's assistant. I would guess that she was written into this role as a result of Fox and Haig having such good chemistry in the pilot episode. So to start off, let's look at what didn't work in the series. To be fair to Ben Elton, I can imagine a lot of the jokes seemed hilariously funny when he wrote them down on paper. Sadly, the transition from paper to performance does not always go as intended. One of the biggest problems with the show is the character of Victoria. I feel bad for saying this when the performer's father is one of my comedy heroes, but to be fair to Beattie Edmonson, she does her best with what is an impossible task. Victoria's jokes feel forced and jarring. The worst bits are where she breaks out into urban slang. So, why does the failure of this character matter so much? Well, that's because she's relied upon as one of the primary sources of humour within the sitcom. The mistake here is that Ben Elton and the director, Dewey Humphreys, should have spotted this early on and made the necessary tweaks. If there had been a second series, they could have gotten away with not bringing her back, but I still think there was potential for a great comedy character there. They could have toned down the character and worked with Beattie on fine-tuning her, but sadly, we never got there. Another problem is that very occasionally, Susan is infected by Victoria's cringiness and actually becomes annoying herself. Thankfully, this doesn't happen too often though. In every episode, there are joke acronyms that spell a rude word. This gets a bit tired after a while. The mayor's jumbled words detract from rather than enhance the comedy, even though Robert Daws delivers these difficult lines very well. Also, there is too much focus on the story arc and not enough focus on the self-contained plots within the episode. A better balance needs to be found. With regards to the health and safety element of the show, well, it would have worked better if they had more of Gerald and his team arguing with the people affected, rather than them discussing it amongst themselves. Gerald, when in conflict with someone, generally works very well. Now, let's focus on the positives. Despite the show's faults, David Haig is great in this role. He does the best with the material given and can elicit some genuine belly laughs. Ben Elton is a master of writing comedy rants, and Haig is the master of delivering them. Susan works very well as the straight character, and obviously I mean straight in the comedy sense of the word. The formidable character of Malika is also good. Suggestion that she may have murdered her husband also makes her an intriguing femme fatale. Kyle, Valerie's narcissistic boyfriend, was very well realised and is actually very funny in his own right. He's the perfect love rival for Valerie's affections, in that he's everything that Gerald is not, both good and bad. The character of Clive works well as Gerald's assistant, and the performer, Luke Gell, has great chemistry with Haig. The responses to The Right Way were pretty brutal. Adam Postons of the Daily Mirror referred to it as the worst sitcom ever, and went on to say, "Herein lies the mystery. How could the man who wrote The Young Ones and 3 classic Blackadder series and blazed the 1980s alternative comedy trail be responsible for this mess?" On watching a preview clip before the show aired, Tom Cole from the Radio Times said, "The show looks about as sophisticated as a spoof sitcom When the Whistle Blows from Ricky Gervais's Extras, but made all the better because it's been put together without Gervais's knowing sense of irony." BBC executive Shane Allen announced in July 2013 that the BBC had agreed with Elton not to renew the show for a second series. Said Allen, "Ben Elton was really bruised by the reception. He felt, if people aren't loving this, I'm not going to put myself through it again." But interestingly, Allen also said, "It didn't catch fire with the audience, but it wasn't what you would call a flop. Over the course of a week, it had 3.5 to 4 million viewers. So, what do I think? Is The Right Way really as bad as people say it is? Well, there's no denying there were some major problems with it. But there are also times where it genuinely made me laugh out loud. In the episode guide later, the average score I give is 6 out of 10. That sounds quite respectable, but I should also caution that I'm known to be over generous with my marking. Should there have been a second series? This is a tough one. Personally, I would like to have seen whether they could turn it around. It should be remembered that Dad's Army and Blackadder didn't quite hit the mark the first time around, but then later on they went on to become British institutions. That being said though, there was such a negative backlash to The Right Way that Ben Elton was already mentally checked out. Also, it would have been difficult for the BBC to justify spending licence payers' money to continue with this. Yet, despite The Right Way not setting the world on fire, the story has a happy ending for Ben Elton, as he bounced back 3 years later with the Shakespearean comedy Upstart Crow, which was warmly received by critics and managed a respectable 3 series, not to mention 3 specials. If you haven't seen this show and want to judge for yourself, The Right Way is available to purchase on Amazon Prime in some countries. It was also released on DVD, but when I last looked, no copies were available. If you have seen The Right Way yourself, then please make your feelings known about it in the comments below. I will now finish this episode off with a breakdown of each episode and my own personal rating. Just a warning that this will contain spoilers, so if you don't want to know what happens, now would be a good time to stop the video. Episode 1, The Rogue Speed Bump. The main focus of this episode seems to be around Gerald buying his love interest Malika a birthday present, but having difficulty in getting the present, having to make trips back and forth to the shop. In the end, he doesn't give Malika the present, but he shows her the receipt, which Malika is horrified to find out is for saucy underwear. It's only on the second viewing that I realised that Gerald had shown her the wrong receipt. He'd given her one of Victoria's receipts by mistake. While this episode certainly has some funny moments, it suffers from a very weak plot. 7 out of 10. Episode 2, Conkers Bonkers. Gerald tries to mend relations with his ex-wife Valerie with a view to getting her back, but blows it by displaying the obsessive behaviour that drove her away in the first place. There is also a work subplot of him trying to prove the dangers of playing conkers, which Gerald fails to do. The mayor, after firing Gerald, starts choking on a conker he mistook for a Ferrero Rocher type chocolate, and Gerald saves the mayor's life and in the process his own job. And conkers are proved to be dangerous as a choking hazard. In terms of story arc, it is announced that Valerie and Kyle are planning to go to Australia. Susan is not happy about this and thinks Kyle is trying to take advantage of her. This is the opposite of the first episode in that there is plenty of plot but not much in the way of laughs. 5 out of 10. Episode 3, Beef will Swing Back. The show starts with Gerald needing the toilet, which is not my favourite way to start an episode. The plot then leads towards toilet roll being stolen at work, which isn't much better. There is also a subplot involving installing a swing at a children's school, but it's not really worth going into. Gerald has a date with Malika, but ends up missing it due to a malfunction with the new toilet roll dispenser. In terms of story arc, Susan is angry to find out that an employee she sacked, Gary, is taking her to tribunal over a fake injury, and she's worried it could bankrupt her. For me, this is the worst episode, mainly because I dislike toilet humour. 4 out of 10. Episode 4, Concealed Sharp Objects. Gerald tries to get a safety initiative set up over the dangers of concealed sharp objects, hence the name, but the mayor turns him down. The mayor also reveals his new assistant Cheryl, who is a woman that Gerald has been arguing with at different shops in episodes 1 and 2. Gerald and Malika are planning to team up to compete in a dance contest against the mayor and Cheryl. Valerie shows signs of jealousy about Gerald and Malika's growing closeness. Malika eventually drops Gerald as a dance partner as she's fed up with him bringing up his ex-wife in conversation. Gerald and his team get called into a disciplinary meeting by the mayor, and Malika saves the day by causing the mayor to prick himself with a concealed sharp object. This helps Gerald get his campaign underway. At the end of the episode, Susan offers to be Gerald's ballroom dance partner. Despite a rocky start with some terrible cringe-worthy moments, and not in a funny way, once this episode gets going, it's quite enjoyable. The scene at the cafe was particularly funny when they're harassing the poor girl serving them. 8 out of 10. Episode 5, Curbing the Curb. Gerald has an upcoming prostate exam and is stuck on the phone a long time in a queue. Victoria has an embarrassing intimate picture that has been uploaded to social media. To start with, she is mortified, then starts enjoying the attention when she starts getting a social media fan base. Susan is not happy about this, but is also very stressed about the upcoming tribunal with her ex-employee Gary. Valerie helps Gerald and Susan prepare for the dance, but when she starts dancing with Gerald, you can see she starts falling for Gerald again. Feeling awkward about this, she quickly makes a sharp exit. Kyle brings a man along under the guise of setting him up with Susan, even though Susan's a lesbian, and it turns out that this person is Gary, the man who is taken to tribunal, who, surprise surprise, isn't really disabled at all. It turns out that Kyle set the whole thing up to prove Gary is lying and has taken video footage to prove it. Kyle also gives his side of the story with Valerie and communicates that he actually gave her sound financial advice. Victoria falls out of love with the attention her picture is getting when she gets a DJing gig cancelled. At the workplace, they talk about reducing curb size in the area, but again, that's not very interesting. The only thing of note from this is that at the end of the episode, he ends up having a radio interview about curb sizes. Unfortunately, he thinks he's speaking to the NHS about his prostate exam and talks at length about having a finger up the backside. This episode serves the story arc very well, but the jokes fall very flat. 5 out of 10. I would have marked this episode lower if it hadn't been for the storyline progression and the whole subplot of Victoria's changing reactions to her leaked photo. This is definitely the best use of her character in the whole series. Episode 6, The Deadly Receptacle. Gerald has his prostate examination on the day of the ballroom dance and is concerned about it. Gerald has an argument with the man in the 8 items or less queue, despite the fact he has more than that. The man says, "I'll remember you." At this stage, I'd already worked out where this is going. Health and safety wise, the team are evaluating the risks of a new coffee chain called Moonbonks that is opening in the Basildrick area. Gerald's issue with this is that the cups pose a safety risk by being too big. The mayor is not happy about Gerald potentially alienating Moonbonks. Susan reveals that Valerie wants to meet Gerald and Susan at a restaurant to discuss something private. There are also jokes about Malika possibly murdering her ex-husband and maybe even her ex-boyfriend. Gerald encounters the same man from the supermarket at the restaurant, taking what Gerald believes to be liberties at the salad bar and remonstrates with him again. Though it turns out it wasn't him who did this, it was actually Valerie. Valerie tells Gerald and Susan that she's going to Australia with Kyle much sooner than anticipated, which neither are happy about. Afterwards, Susan tells Gerald that Valerie will be at the dance and this may be his opportunity to win her back. Gerald turns up for the prostate exam and surprise, surprise, it's the man from the supermarket and the restaurant doing the exam. Okay, I saw this coming a mile off, but this scene is still hilariously funny. Gerald gets to the ballroom dance and is about to dance with Susan, but then Susan fakes an injury so that Gerald can dance with Valerie. Gerald and Valerie win the competition, then Valerie reveals that she's postponing her move to Australia and that she will call him sometime. The DJ becomes incapacitated due to his face being stuck in a large Moonbonks cup, and therefore DJing duties fall to Victoria. This episode delivers well on plot and on laughs. A solid 8 out of 10 for me, probably the best episode in the series. I hope that you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please like and subscribe, as I plan to do more in the future. If you have ideas for future comedy topics for me to discuss, please mention them in the comments below.